Let's say we have a Rails 3 application with a long list of items, and we would like to add some pagination to this list here. So what's the go-to gem for pagination? Well, it's will paginate, of course, so we hop into our gem file and just add will paginate here. But the problem is that will paginate, the current release of the gem, does not support Rails 3. We have to use a pre-release, which is 3.0 pre-2 currently. And this release hasn't even been updated for many months, so I kind of question how current will paginate is going to stay with Rails 3. Maybe there's some alternatives that we can use for pagination. Thankfully, there is a nice alternative to pagination in Rails 3. It's a gem called Kaminari, and I think it's a much cleaner implementation than will paginate, and it offers several feature improvements as well. So let's give it a try here. The first step is to add the gem to our gem file. So we'll just call gem Kaminari, and then run the bundle command to get it installed. One thing this gem provides is a page scope which we can call on any active record model. So here I am in my controller, in the index action here where I'm fetching all of my products. I can just call page and just treat it like any other scope on my model, and then just pass in which current page I want to view. So I'm just going to use the page parameter that the user passes in, and then inside the index template where I'm listing my products, I can just call the paginate helper method that the gem provides and pass in my products in there. So now if we reload the page here, you can see we now have pagination links that work completely. So quite simple to just add some quick pagination here. Now it defaults to 25 items per page, but we can easily change that. And we can do this by calling another scope called per. So back in our controller, after we call .page, we just call .per and then pass in how many we want per page. So in this case, I'll do 5 so we get a lot of pages. And reload this here. And so now we get 5 per page. Works nicely. One thing I really like about this is that it flows nicely with the new active record queries in Rails 3. This order call, for example, we can move it anywhere along this chain of events, and it would work just as expected because these are just simple scopes on your model. We could even move the page and per calls into other named scopes in your model in other class methods, and it would just work as expected. One little gotcha, however, is that this per call needs to happen sometime after the page call. The reason for that is the page call basically adds that per scope as an option. If you call it before, you're going to get an undefined method error because it hasn't been added yet. It's only available after you call page. Now what if we want to change the way this pagination looks? Well, there's several ways to go about that depending on what you want changed. Let's say we want to change the previous and next links here. That's a pretty common requirement. Maybe we want to change the way this arrow looks and maybe use a full word previous. Now you can customize this inside the locales files. So if you check under your config locales directory, you should have an English version there, and this is really convenient because if you're supporting additional languages, it's easy to add these and change the pagination behavior for those other languages. But here we'll just change our English version, and to do that you pass in a views option and pagination, and then for the previous link you just pass in previous, then followed by whatever you want for the link to be. Now you have to do HTML escaping for this, because it's not escaped otherwise. So we'll do a less than sign for previous and next. We'll just say next with a greater than sign. And for the third option you can pass in here is truncate, which defaults to 3 periods. I'm just going to leave that as is, but you can customize it if you want. So if we reload the page here, you can see, well, there's our changes, simple as pie. And of course, for additional customization, you can also get by a lot with styling. If you view the source here, you can see the actual HTML which is generated, and you can use these classes in your CSS to add some styling. One thing neat to point out here is that it's using the nav tag in HTML5 for the pagination. Just an interesting feature to be aware of. However, what if there's some additional functionality you want to customize that you can't do through style sheets? For example, if we go to the first page here, you can see our previous link disappears. Maybe we want it to still show up, but just kind of be grayed out and disabled. How do we do that? Well, Kaminari is actually a Rails engine, and it comes with many view files which you can override to fully customize the way it looks in your app. To help out with this, there's a generator it provides. You can run with RailsG Kaminari, and then views, and then you need to supply the name of a theme. If we use default, it'll just use the standard one that it comes with. If you're wondering about what different themes you can pass into this generator, check out the Kaminari Themes project on GitHub. As you can see, there's only 2 listed here, but I'm sure more will be added, and it's a great way to experiment with how different pagination looks. So if you want pagination to look more like it does on GitHub, just pass in the GitHub theme and it'll generate it for you. Alright, now let's take a look at what was generated. If you check out the app views directory, you can see there's a Kaminari directory here, and it's filled in with a bunch of partials which we can use to customize the various bits of pagination. The main one here is called Paginator, and that's a good place to start, and this is the most complex one, so don't get overwhelmed. It's pretty basic if you break it down. So we have our nav tag here, which you can customize and change it to a div if you prefer that. We have our current or our previous page link and our next page links here, and basically the rest of our numbered page links in the middle there. And so what we want to do here is change the behavior of this previous link section. So as you can see here, if we're not on the first page, it's going to show us the previous link tag. Otherwise, it's going to show us the previous span tag. And both of those end up rendering a partial. You can see we have our previous link partial here, which just renders that, and our previous span partial here, which just renders that. So really all we have to do is to add additional behavior into this previous span in order to get what we want. So let's base it off of the previous link partial here. As you can see, we render a link, and what we want is to take is the contents of that link. And notice it's just using the T method to do a translation, so it's based off of the locales file that I showed you earlier. And if we place it in here, we'll just get the word previous inside this span. So let's also say disabled so that we can gray it out. And now check this out. If we reload our page here, our previous link shows up, but it's now disabled. And I did the styling off camera in case you're wondering. And you would also want to do that for the next link here, but that's just repeating those same steps. Well, that's it for our brief look at the Kaminari gem. I recommend you try it out if you're needing pagination in your Rails 3 applications. Now, one thing I didn't cover here is the various options you can pass into the paginate helper method. You can change the window behavior, which is the behavior of those numbered pages in the pagination. You can also add additional parameters to your URLs. And there's a remote option which you can pass in to add the data remote attribute to all the links. It doesn't do any additional magic behavior. It just turns them into AJAX links basically through the Rails.js file. It's still up to you to handle the AJAX requests in your controller and views. But I've already covered that in previous episodes, so I won't do it here. I hope you enjoyed this episode, and I'll see you next week.